At 8 o'clock, this is the UK Tonight. Coming up, the government admits the war in Iran is likely to affect the cost of living. Oil prices saw their sharpest rise in 6 years today, 60% higher than when the war started. And the Chancellor conceded that inflation is likely to rise because of the conflict, putting strain on household finances.
I'm clear-eyed about my response to the current situation. My economic approach will both be responsive to a changing world and responsible in the national interest.
Higher inflation means any cut in interest rates is unlikely in the near future, and with uncertainty too on the markets, we'll find out what the war means for your pension and investments. As the conflict in the Middle East rages on, we're expecting to hear from Donald Trump this evening. He's hosting Republicans in his golf resort in Florida. We'll bring that to you live. Also tonight, why the taxpayer could end up paying for Ian Huntley's funeral. The killer of Hollywell's and Jessica Chapman died at the weekend after he was attacked in prison. And now there is anger because the prison service could contribute towards his cremation or burial unless his family makes alternative arrangements. Plus, the body in the reservoir. Police in Wales are asking for the public's help in identifying a man found dead in Powys, wearing only a wetsuit. We'll take a look at where the case, one of the most baffling in the UK, could go next. All that's come and much more in the UK Tonight. The Prime Minister and the Chancellor today both admitted that uncertainty over the war in Iran is likely to impact the cost of living here in the UK. Oil prices have soared, which is likely to hit inflation, making a cut in interest rates unlikely in the near future. Household energy bills are also likely to be impacted. Petrol and diesel prices could soon be 10 pence higher than they were before the war started. What's more, uncertainty in the markets is hitting pensions and investments, things like ISAs, pain which is usually short-term but doesn't do much for consumer confidence. Here's what Rachel Reeves had to say in the Commons this afternoon.
I understand the anxiety felt by families and businesses during these incredibly uncertain times. And this conflict affects us all, and we must respond to it. As I have demonstrated time and time again, I will take the necessary decisions to help families with the cost of living and protect the public finances. I'm clear-eyed about my response to the current situation. My economic approach will both be responsive to a changing world and responsible in the national interest. The economic impact of the situation in the Middle East will depend, of course, on its severity and its duration. The movements that we have already seen are likely to put upward pressure on inflation in the coming months. But I also want to confirm to the House that our financial markets are functioning, and I'm in regular touch with the Governor of the Bank of England. This afternoon, I spoke with G7 finance ministers, setting out my priorities for the international cooperation needed. First, calling for immediate de-escalation and a return to the diplomatic process.
So what's going on in the oil industry and why does it mean you could be worse off? Here's our economics and data editor, Ed Conway.
So the latest economic news from the Gulf. I mean, let's just take an update, first of all, on some of the details here. You already know this. So the world's biggest oil terminal, Ras Tanura in Saudi Arabia, that's down, as is the world's biggest natural gas refiner. They turn that into liquefied natural gas at Ras Laffan. Both of those are down. And that's kind of core to this story here. But on top of that, you have other kind of oil installations around the Gulf. For instance, in Kuwait and also in Abu Dhabi, cutting production right now. And then there's the question of stuff getting through, and right now not much is getting through the Straits of Hormuz there. And all of that is causing serious consequence when it comes to oil prices, when it comes to gas prices. What I'm doing here is I'm comparing basically where oil prices went after the outbreak of the Ukraine war, and we're going to just compare that to kind of where we are this time around. Have a look at this, OK? So that line is what happened with Ukraine, kind of the days after the invasion of Ukraine. This time around, the red line is showing you Iran this year. And just look at that. So far, the trajectory of oil prices is higher than it was in 2022, rather, for the Ukraine war. What about for gas prices? Have a look at this, because obviously gas was at the heart of what was going on in Russia, really big kind of gas exporter. That's 2022, so you can see the big spike in gas prices in 2022. How about this time around? Well, it's kind of in line with that. And it's worth saying, obviously, actually in 2022, it was starting from a higher base, but just the trajectory of gas prices is going up at a not dissimilar rate, albeit that the levels themselves aren't as high. And on top of that, you've got this concern, particularly in Europe. This is showing you storage levels going across the year, just in recent years, so 21, 22, all of these different years. You see it goes down kind of in the winter, we're kind of digging into storage. This is across all of Europe, and the UK kind of sucks into that as well, because we don't have much of our own storage. And then it gets rebuilt. Look at where we are right now in storage across Europe. So storage levels in 2026, where we are right now, about 29%, is one of the lowest that we've had in recent years. And that storage, if it's going to get rebuilt over the course of the year, it's going to be really expensive, really expensive. And higher gas prices also potentially feeding into inflation, almost certainly feeding into inflation. This is the forecast from Capital Economics for inflation this year and next year. And look, it's kind of close to the Bank of England's 2% target. But now take into account the idea that maybe you have a short, sharp shock on energy prices. Look at what happens. All of a sudden, that's not around 2%, it's 2.8%. And if it's longer lived, just look at what happens to that bar. Up to 3%, over 3%. And at that point, it becomes really hard for the Bank of England to basically be cutting interest rates. Often they have to start raising interest rates. And if indeed that's going to happen, we'll have a look at what might indeed eventuate. So this is showing you Bank of England interest rates, 3.75 at the moment, percent. Back at the end of February, they were expected to come down another 2 cuts in this month, or this month, and then potentially later on this year. Just last week, it was basically a lot of economists saying, well, maybe nothing. Now, have a look at this. Today, economists expecting maybe another hike, so interest rates to go up this year. Just underlining how much the events that are thousands of miles away are shifting domestic economics here in the UK.
Well, let's bring in our chief political correspondent, John Craig, to reflect more on what was said in the House of Commons today, because we were expecting important updates from the government, given the point we're at in this war 10 days in. What more did we learn from the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves?
Well, we had 2 big statements today, one from the Chancellor indeed, and then that was followed by John Healey, the Defence Secretary. Let me concentrate on Rachel Reeves, because for anybody worried about the price of fuel at the pumps or the cost of their heating bills in this rather chilly March, that was obviously the most important thing. Now, it was very noticeable that Rachel Reeves tried to portray herself as the consumer's champion by issuing a pretty blunt warning to petrol retailers and other energy and oil companies not to rip people off, take advantage of the rise in international oil prices. Now, there's already been claims from motoring organisations that the petrol companies are whacking up their prices while they're still selling old stocks of petrol. And so Rachel Reeves said today that she would continue to monitor prices at the pumps as the situation develops. She said this. She said she'd asked the Competition and Markets Authority to be vigilant across prices, including essentials like road fuel and heating oil. Let me be absolutely clear, she said, I won't tolerate any company exploiting the current crisis to make excess profits at consumers' expense. She talked also about the energy price cap. She claimed it would fall in April as planned before the Middle East crisis erupted. Well, if things get really bad, that may have to change, but that's what she claimed today. And of course, she was speaking after a meeting with G7 finance ministers, where they agreed to stand ready to take necessary measures to support oil supplies. Now, she was talking about the Iran war drove the cost of a barrel of crude oil to its highest level since 2022, over $100 a barrel. Frenzied trading, it was claimed, as the Asia-Pacific markets. Now, that 2022 figure is significant because, of course, relates to when Russia invaded Ukraine and sent oil prices up. So the G7 finance ministers obviously very concerned about that. Rachel Reeves also was talking about the whole cost of living crisis. The Prime Minister was speaking earlier in the day about that being a priority for this government. Obviously, it's been a real worry for the government, which is so desperate and determined to try and help people worried about the cost of living and worried about inflation. Inflation's been coming down, but of course there's nothing sends up inflation more than big increases in the price of petrol at the pumps. So government's very worried about that. The Chancellor is saying she's going to keep an eye on the oil companies, stop them ripping off consumers. Now, another point, defence spending. Now, for the second time in a week, Jeremy Hunt, the former Conservative Chancellor, was urging the current Chancellor to boost defence spending. And, of course, plenty of MPs have said that's got to happen given the international turmoil and volatility. However, what Rachel Reeves has told MPs today is that the defence spending is going to be increased, not necessarily an increase in the Ministry of Defence budget, but from Treasury reserves. So they're dipping into the Treasury reserves to boost defence spending. So a series of emergency measures unveiled by the Chancellor today. But of course, if things get much worse, there may have to be more. And there's every chance that fuel prices for both petrol at the pumps and heating oil in our homes will continue to rise.
John Craig, thank you very much. John Craig with a picture there from Westminster. But what is the picture for you? Let's get into it in more details. I'm joined in the studio by financial educator Abigail Foster. Abigail, perfect person to have in the studio tonight because we just heard the politics of it all, the Chancellor pretty much talking about the ramifications of the price of oil going up and the war in Iran, everything from inflation and everything else. Everybody talks about the petrol prices, first of all, don't they, whenever the price of oil goes up? But the ripple effect is far wider than that. Run us through a list of things that people might not perhaps have thought about yet.
Of course. So, yes, petrol, because it is the quickest impact. Often we'll see petrol prices start to rise almost instantly. You're then looking at, obviously, if you imagine if we go back to the beginning, it's all about oil. So the Strait of Hormuz being shut means that the kind of international global impact is there's less oil coming out. So the supply has been dampened. So if you think, yes, petrol, but also the oil that gets the planes into the sky. So airline tickets are going to start to rise. So people's holidays are going to become more expensive. Insurance is going to go up because of the cost of the impact of everything that's gone on. Obviously, petrol prices coming back. Then you've got transport costs. So transport to get our food all around the country, to get our goods where it needs to be. These are all going to start to rise. And these transport costs inevitably will be passed on to the consumer, which is us. You know, and then energy bills. Energy bills is a huge one that we're going to see slowly, kind of gradually coming up. So obviously energy bills right now, we've got a price cap between April and June. However, the government haven't declared what's going on past June. And we in the UK are kind of price takers when it comes to wholesale energy prices rather than price makers, which means that, yes, whilst we don't necessarily get all of our oil from the Middle East, we get it from various different places, we are going to feel the impact of the price rise globally because it is going to impact our energy prices. You know, oil at the moment, I think we're not going to see as big a hike because obviously we've got some oil reserves to kind of counteract the issues that we're having. But gas is a really big problem because it's very difficult to store gas. I think a final thing I would say as well is something that a lot of people might not think about is helium. Helium powers things like supercomputers and MRI scanners. And a large amount of helium comes from Qatar, and obviously they are not able to export that. And so we might see the cost of those sorts of things rise as well. Yeah,
I mean, it is a really big ripple effect, as our data and economics editor, Ed Conway, says. Energy is everything and everything is energy. Let's go back to travel, because, you know, petrol, again, like you said, is the quickest impact that people see and feel. But travel, prices have gone up really quickly already. Jet fuel prices doubling since the start of the conflict, piling pressure on carriers already navigating tight, longer routes to avoid that conflict area, to avoid flying over the Middle East.
Yeah, well, exactly. So many people that you guys have spoken to, I've spoken to through social media, are having to go the other way around. You know, they're having to go back through America if they're in Australia or if they're out east. And that creates a lot more demand for those flights, and therefore the flight goes up astronomically. So yes, I think, and we're also seeing obviously the amount of people that aren't able to claim on their insurance because this is an extraordinary event. You know, I think if I was to speak to those people, I'd say make sure that you keep receipts of everything you're doing, because obviously your airlines have a duty of care to you to protect you and make sure that you are safe and that you've got security in those situations. But also check your travel insurance documents. And if you used a credit card to purchase your flights, Section 75 may be applicable, but it's not always a guarantee.
Yeah, I was just looking on our Money blog. A London flight 8 times more expensive than last week. It was a flight from Seoul to London on the 11th of March. It was £422. It's now over £3,000. Let's talk about mortgage payments, investments, savings, if you're lucky to have them, and the effect that this is all going to have on those.
Yep, so the quickest one to go is Bank of England. So Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England, back in February, made a decision, it was a 5-4 decision, to bring the base rate from 4 to 3.75. You know, there was a huge prediction that we were going to see another rate cut March 19th, which is when the next Bank of England decision is. It's very unlikely, if not impossible now, that we will see another rate cut. So I think mortgage advisors or mortgage company, banks, etc., have already priced this in. So I don't think we're going to see any reduction in those mortgage rates, which is going to be felt by those on variable rates if you have a variable mortgage, or if you are looking to change your mortgage or take out a mortgage. It's very frustrating. Obviously, a lot of people were banking on this, and so we're waiting. And now, in the space of days, that's all changed. The slight positive is that obviously if base rates stay higher or are increased, then savings rates, in theory, should go up. But I can imagine banks will, you know, be a bit slower to keep those up, as they are very fast to bring those mortgage rates up.
And of course, with the cost of living, people aren't able to save that much at the moment. How do you mitigate against losses? How do you best protect your money in times like these?
Well, if we're talking about, I've been asked a lot about investing, so I'll start there, because I've been asked about what do I do about my investments? Do I sell now? Absolutely do not take emotional risk decisions when it comes to investments. Investing should always be a long-term consideration anyway for most people. And so if your investments are diversified, so they're split across different assets, different countries, etc., you should be able to mitigate that risk. And hopefully we see a bounce back over the next few months. You know, we saw a few years ago with Liberation Day that had huge effects on our investment and the stock market, but within months it was already sky-high numbers again. So just be low risk and be
a long-term view.
Yeah, long-term view when it comes to your investments. In terms of energy bills, unfortunately, I think if I was talking to you a few days ago, I would have said go and seek out a fixed contract. Please don't be one of the 60% of homes on those variable contracts, because you are probably going to see rises in your energy bills. But as we go into the summer, usually people spend less on their energy bills anyway, obviously when we're outside more. So hopefully that is going to be more positive. And then when it comes to petrol prices, just obviously make sure you're doing enough research into your local area where the best petrol prices are, diesel prices as well. And just, yeah, budgeting, I hate to say it, but obviously as a financial educator, keeping an emergency fund pot for situations like this, which are just unprecedented circumstances.
Yeah, budget is never a bad word. Abigail, thank you. Abigail Foster there, our financial educator, taking you through what you can do about your personal finances in these uncertain times. Thank you. Let's bring you some breaking news from Australia. 5 female Iranian football players have been granted asylum. You may have seen this story developing throughout the course of the day. The women reportedly left their team's hotel during the Asian Cup and sought government assistance, a case which had attracted the attention of President Donald Trump, Australia's Home Affairs Minister, saying that the players have now been moved to safety. That is the Iranian women's football team seeking asylum in Australia. More on that throughout the course of the evening here on Sky News. Now, today, the Defence Secretary once again had to defend the UK's response to the conflict in the Middle East. Speaking in the Commons today, John Healey hit out at what he called armchair generals on the opposition benches.
I've been unable to find any evidence, in public or in this House, of the Shadow Defence Secretary calling at any stage for military assets to be moved to the Middle East before the war began. Indeed, the Shadow Foreign Secretary, barely a month ago in this House, was saying in this chamber, calling for our military, and I quote, to prioritise or repurpose inventory to contribute to NATO's High North missions. He really is proving himself quite an armchair general. General, hindsight, wise only after the event. And I'm really disappointed.
Well, despite even the Defence Secretary's comments, one of the authors of the government's defence review has said the UK should urgently accelerate plans to spend more on its armed forces or risk being vulnerable to the kind of missile and drone attacks seen across the Gulf and in Russia's war against Ukraine. General Sir Richard Barron's telling Sky News that politicians need to make very difficult choices to shift investment away from peacetime priorities such as health and welfare. Our Security and Defence editor Deborah Haynes has been taking a look at the state of the UK's armed forces.
British fighter jets defending the skies above Cyprus and across the Middle East as Donald Trump's war with Iran rages. Here, a suspected Iranian drone is destroyed by an F-35 jet. While the Royal Navy is preparing finally to deploy this Type 45 destroyer with the ability to take down ballistic missiles. It may also send an aircraft carrier. An impressive show of force. But the reality is a lot less reassuring. Put bluntly, the UK military has too few troops, ships, jets, guns and, crucially, ammunition to sustain a major fight for very long. Insiders working at the Ministry of Defence tell me the sorry state of the armed forces is the brutal reality of the impact of decisions by successive governments over decades to spend more on peacetime priorities and less on defence. Even now, with war in the Middle East and Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, there's been no decisive shift to put Britain back onto more of a wartime footing. Instead, there's a widening gap between the rhetoric you hear from ministers about how they're rebuilding the Army, Navy and the Air Force and the reality on the ground. To give a sense of what's been lost, we've tracked how the military has shrunk since the Cold War. These figures don't include reservists, but if the UK were to be drawn into a prolonged conflict today, it would only have around 125,000 full-time forces, comprising almost 26,000 in the Navy, 70,000 in the Army, and 27,500 in the RAF. By contrast, in 2003, when the UK joined the US in invading Iraq, it had just over 200,000 service personnel, with 42,000 in the Navy, 112,000 in the Army, and 53,000 in the RAF. Going back even further to 1983, during the Cold War, there were 321,000 regular members of the armed forces, split between 72,000 in the Navy, 159,000 in the Army, and 90,000 in the Air Force. The defence budget, as a proportion of GDP, has shrunk as well, with Britain spending 5% on the military in 1983, compared with just 2.5% in 2003 and 2.3% now.
Kia, nice to see you. Thanks for your time.
The Prime Minister has vowed to reverse the slide and invest in new technologies, but there's still no clarity on how plans set out in a major defence review published last year will be funded, or if it will be delivered faster than a lengthy timeframe of 2035.
As a country, we are short of cash, and there's some very difficult choices to make about how you find more money for defence. And our view was the government would have to find more money sooner. And what I would say is the world, since the review was published by the government, has just got more difficult. So the urgency is greater and the vulnerability is absolutely no less.
With Britain's sovereign bases in Cyprus already in the firing line, though, the armed forces are having to fight Iran's missiles and drones with what they've got and hope it's enough. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Still to come here on the UK Tonight, Soham killer Ian Huntley's funeral arrangements could fall on the taxpayer following his death on Saturday. And the mystery man found dead in a wetsuit in a Welsh reservoir. Police are appealing for help in identifying him.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist?
Who's funnier?
Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond.
You're like, what?
Historic day here today. Congratulations, this is a huge moment. But what happens now?
We can't just...
Right, news in about the Soham murderer Ian Huntley. Now, we understand that he could be given a burial or a cremation funded by the taxpayer, unless his family make alternative arrangements. Well, the Soham killer died on Saturday. This is after he was attacked at Franklin Prison in County Durham. Sky correspondent Molly Malone joins us with more details. Molly, this has been a developing story ever since Ian Huntley was attacked in prison last week. Let's talk about the details we've had today, which is what will happen to him now he has died, and the controversy is that the taxpayer could end up funding whatever happens.
Yeah, exactly that. So the exact arrangements are yet to be worked out, but how it works is there's basically like an upper limit or a cap on how much the prison service, i.e. the taxpayer, is allowed to contribute to any funeral or cremation for people that die in prison custody. So he was killed in prison custody, he was attacked in prison. That can be used, an upper limit of £3,000 can be used to pay for the funeral or a cremation unless the family make alternative arrangements, unless they have, say, a prepaid funeral plan in place. Now, the money can strictly be used for what's known as reasonable costs. So that means it can be spent on things like a simple coffin, cremation or burial fees, but the money has to be paid directly to the funeral director. It can't go on things like flowers, a headstone, order of service sheets, or any hospitality or transportation costs. So that's basically how the money can be spent, and it's up to the prison governor to work out how to apportion it, essentially. But it's not used for
This is standard practice.
It's standard practice, yeah, exactly that. So it's a long-standing policy, actually, across successive governments, that the prison service pays for people that die in prison custody. The money has been used before to pay for the funeral costs of people like the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe back in 2020 and Raymond Morris in 2014. But, you know, many will be familiar now with who Ian Huntley was. He was known as the Soham double murderer. He was a school caretaker and killed the schoolgirls' 10-year-old best friends, Holly Wells and Jessica Chapman. He was allegedly attacked at HMP Franklin, which is a high-security jail in Durham, during a prison workshop last Thursday, and then was left in a critical condition after being hit with an improvised weapon, a metal bar, allegedly, and then he died in hospital on Saturday. It's not clear what his family might want to do or what his family might do. His daughter, in an interview with The Sun on Sunday, said that she doesn't feel that he is deserving of a sort of state-funded funeral, if you like. But it is the case that the prison service, and hence the taxpayer, can contribute to those costs up to a limit of £3,000 if the family don't make alternative arrangements to pay for it. The Ministry of Justice say that their thoughts are with the victims' families, clearly. But if they didn't do this, say if they decided to not do it, then that would be breaking sort of a precedent in the sense that it's happened for others in the past.
OK, all right, Molly, thank you, Molly Malone there with the latest on that story. Now, in October 2024, the body of a man wearing a wetsuit was pulled from a remote reservoir in Wales. His identity remains a mystery, with detectives so far unable to establish who he is or the circumstances of his death. Now, 16 months on, scientists have used his skull to replicate what his face may have looked like, and police are hoping it could provide the breakthrough they need to solve this case. Our national correspondent Tom Parminter has this report.
Mystery surrounds this face. A man found dead in a wetsuit with no other evidence.
It's baffled the police. How can someone wash up here in a reservoir in mid-Wales and there be no clues? Only the extra-large wetsuit he was wearing. After 16 months of investigating, the police still have no idea who he is.
It's the fact that there was no belongings, nothing found around the banking or no vehicle left nearby. Currently, none of the available information to us suggests a criminal element to it. However, it would be remiss to sort of say that new information may not change that.
And you now have the face?
We do. The hope is that we can get that out there and somebody will recognise the male and be able to get in touch with us.
This could be the breakthrough, and it's come from this lab in Liverpool. They took the scans of his skull and piece by piece recreated his face.
We see a middle-aged man who's got an unusual dental pattern that probably would be recognisable because he would have more trouble closing his lips than most of us. If it comes to us, then it's usually a difficult case. That means that the person is not necessarily being missed. That's always quite sad. There might be extreme circumstances to why that is. For example, a murder, or in this case, it looks more like an accident, but may not be. So it's sad, and we're always really delighted if we can help with identification.
He was found by a walker here in October 2024. The police believe he'd been in the water for around 12 weeks. So did he enter this reservoir in July of that summer?
Detectives have scoured crime databases, fingerprint records here and overseas, and missing people cases. But none of that has helped identify him.
What do you hope the face might provide for you?
Just who he is, that we can try and track any family, friends or anyone who knows him, and that he can then be afforded the sort of dignity of them deciding how he is permanently laid to rest.
This case could lead anywhere, but they need help if they're to solve it. Tom Parmenter, Sky News, Mid Wales.
There really is a baffling case. Missing persons expert Charlie Hedges joins me now to discuss it. And Charlie, what were your initial thoughts when you heard about this case?
Well, I was supporting another family in Bristol in relation to a missing person there, and so immediately we wondered whether that might be relevant. But because of the circumstances and the information we've heard, it was fairly easy to rule it out. And we assumed that within a fairly short space of time, someone would come forward and identify him, and things would be resolved. But clearly, that's not the case.
Yeah, and just listening there to the authorities there in Tom Parmenter's piece, they've been through everything. I mean, this is a remote reservoir. All they had was a body and a wetsuit. There were no belongings, no car in the vicinity to see how we got there. I mean, they started with very little and they've exhausted all avenues. Just give us an idea of the steps they'll have gone through before they got to this particular point.
Well, the normal process would be to look for missing persons who have gone missing, been reported missing in this country, extend that to international searches through Interpol as well, do these sort of media appeals, and that normally resolves the case, and the dots are joined up and we find out what's going on. But clearly that hasn't happened in this case, which is somewhat unusual. And as you say, it's odd that there's no vehicle, there's nothing else. How did he get there? And you know, did someone else take him there? Did he take himself there? It's just a complete mystery at the moment.
Yeah, no evidence of criminality, but then, you know, there's no evidence at all. No cause of death from the post-mortem, no match on any databases, whether it be DNA or missing persons files. A person not being missed, is that unusual? I mean, it feels unfathomable to people watching. If somewhere in their life just simply disappeared, they would know about it. But it's actually more common than people think.
Well, it's certainly strange. The circumstances are unusual, but on our database at the moment, there's something just over 1,000 unidentified bodies. Some of those have been known about for many, many years and never been identified. So it's not completely isolated, but slightly unusual given the coverage that's been gone through the media and what have you.
Well, let's bring up his picture again. This is the facial reconstruction from Face Lab in Liverpool. What are the accuracy of these kind of images? Because it's really all they've got to go on now. He's a middle-aged man and his defining feature seems to be his teeth, his overbite, if you like, and that is unusual. And if someone watching tonight feels that they know him, they should get in touch with the police. But just how accurate a picture do you think that is?
They're not 100%, but it's a technique that's been used for many, many years and used to be done with clay modelling and this understanding of how the skull changes and how the skin forms on it has been fairly well defined. It tends to be a reasonable representation, we think, and hopefully it will be enough to jog someone's thoughts to pick up the phone and say, I think I know who this person is.
And in terms of how people get in touch, it's worth reminding people, even if they're not too sure if they know him, but he's similar to someone they met once, they should pick up the phone, right?
Yeah, we need to get those leads and understand what's going on, and the smallest piece of information can lead to a significant breakthrough.
Charlie, really good of you to come on tonight to reflect on this case. As I said, it's baffled authorities for 2 years now, but hopefully this will be the breakthrough in solving the case. Charlie Hedges, missing persons expert. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Still to come on the UK tonight, I'm going to speak to a woman whose small business has been completely destroyed by that huge fire in Glasgow. We'll speak to her next.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor. Free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
Hello, and thank you for watching tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. You can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable? What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree. And laughs along the way.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
Glasgow Central railway station expected to stay closed for at least 2 days. This follows a devastating fire that gutted a neighbouring building. All train services from Scotland's busiest station were cancelled today, and Network Rail says it will likely remain closed tomorrow as well. Scotland's First Minister, John Swinney, has promised financial support to the city's council, but the building, which dates back to 1851, has been completely destroyed, taking with it dozens of local businesses. Well, Louise McDermott is the owner of Lola's Lash Boutique, and she joins me now. Louise, yours, one of the businesses to go up in smoke yesterday.
Yeah, it was. Honestly, it's completely devastating.
I I saw those pictures yesterday and couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. It's, you know, it's a huge fire that you'd associate with a war zone or something. I had to actually check the location of that image, and it was in Glasgow. Tell me about how you first saw these pictures here when you heard about what was happening.
I was visiting my son in hospital. He was in the Queen Elizabeth at the time. I'd seen something on social media. I'd seen like a wee small fire outside and I thought nothing of it. It's Union Street, there's usually a lot going on. And then I seen another thing and I thought, no, this is quite bad. But again, didn't know the extreme of it. I called one of my neighbours in the building and she just screamed on the phone. She just broke down crying. And she's like, the building's gone.
Oh, Louise, I can only imagine how you were feeling literally watching your business burn.
It was devastating.
So what do you know so far today? I mean, you know, we're still in the early aftermath of it. I'm presuming, looking at those pictures, that there is nothing physical left of your boutique.
It's completely gone. My business burned down about 6 p.m. at night. It was completely gone by then. It was then when I got there, I drove to the city centre and I seen the building up ablaze, and it was my neighbours' buildings, and I'm on the phone to them, like describing what I could see. But one of my friends, her business was still standing, and she was just devastated.
Yeah, talk to me about your neighbours and the other businesses that have been affected, because there were quite a few in that big historic building.
Yeah, there's like maybe 10 businesses in each floor.
All independent?
Yeah, all independent, small businesses built like from scratch, like blood, sweat and tears, like they're babies almost. Just their livelihood's gone. Some friends that I've known there for 14 years, I've been in the building for 14 years now, and just it's devastating.
Yeah. I'm just looking at some notes here about our interview, and you've described it as a wee salon that did really well, but, you know, this was your livelihood. This was over a decade in the making. Just talk to me about the effect of that on you and your family.
Just a place where I go. It's maybe kind of safe place for me as well, like a place where my clients feel safe. They've been going there for years. I've made so many friends out of the place as well. Like, it's going to be like really bad for the family as well. Like, it's my livelihood and income. It's just devastating.
Yeah, I mean, in the short term, it is that, isn't it? It's upset, it's devastation, it's your livelihood, as you said, your safe place. That's your business. You host a community there. You know, salons, boutiques are hubs, are community hubs. And I know in the short term that is really affecting. But in the long term, where do you stand on liability? Do you know how that fire started? Insurance? Are you in the weeds of all of that yet? Are you getting any help?
I do know that it started from a vape store down below. There's early coverage of that. And what I think's happened is they've put it out with water instead of foam. It was an electrical fire. So something's went completely wrong. And the fire's just got out of hand.
Louise, what's the response from the local community been like? Because I know that already you set up a fundraising page to get you back up on your feet. In, you know, big business terms, you're not asking for much, but in small business terms, what you're asking for means the world.
Honestly, the community's been absolutely amazing, honestly. Like, my clients have been absolutely fabulous. Again, I've known them for 14 years. Even people that I don't know are donating and stuff as well. It's just amazing. Small community people are offering me like lashes, even beds, a place to rent, like even free renting places as well. There've been so many salons getting in touch with me.
Yeah,
amazing the response.
Yeah, and presumably, you know, the other independent businesses are being offered help as well from the community. But what about from the local council and the authorities there? Have you had anyone official reach out to you yet?
One MSP message, but I just don't remember her name, but someone did get in contact with me and spoke to me. I just don't know her name.
Yeah, was that with offers of condolences or practical help? Because let's face it, that's what you need right now.
Yeah, she just said I'm here to help and gave me her email address, but that was it. And I haven't reached out or anything yet. I don't really know what like constituency or anything she's with. Yeah. I just know that she's got in contact through social media.
Oh, well, look, Louise, this only happened last night. And again, I'm just looking at the scenes that were recorded of that building ablaze, your business ablaze, and, you know, I'm sure you don't know which way's up and which way is down at the moment. You'll be in huge shock. Please let people know how they can help. Where can they head to help you and other businesses like you?
Just look on Instagram and stuff, and our social media platforms. Everyone's sharing them, and they're not asking for much. These are just wee small donations to maybe help someone buy some equipment, maybe pay for a month's rent. It's not a lot of money. It's just maybe a coffee. You could give up your coffee or something. Just anything to help these wee businesses in their lives.
Well, small independent business, female-founded, working mother. You know, you ran your salon to fit in around your children, and, you know, so many parents can identify with that. And also, I know your son was in hospital when you got the news. I really hope that he's okay. And look, I just wish you all the best, Louise. It's amazing what happens when the chips are down. People from local communities come together, and I really hope you're back up and running soon. It may look different, but hopefully it will feel the same.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, Louise, really appreciate your time. That's Louise McDermott, owner of Lola's Lash Boutique in Glasgow. The physical building destroyed in that fire, but the service by Louise and her team no doubt will continue. Thank you so much. Still to come here on the UK Tonight. We'll have the latest sport for you. League One Port Vale learning which Premier League giant they will play in the FA Cup quarter-finals. Details on the way.
A lifeline for millions of people living on both sides of one of the most volatile international borders.
It's dams like these that have become inflection points between the two nuclear-armed neighbours, which could potentially lead to water wars in the future. A terror attack has shattered the peace and tranquility of Kashmir. At least 26 people have been killed and as many injured when militants fired upon them. I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
The old and young, all weary after being trapped for days as the worst floods have hit Kerala in a century.
3 days we are on a rooftop. They have no food, nothing.
The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. There have been reported deaths and many injuries, several critical.
Many families will grapple with the unimaginable loss of one of the worst disasters in India's aviation history.
The spiraling violence between two nuclear-armed neighbours that harbour decades of hostility just seems to be getting worse by the day.
Garbage dumps like this not only threaten the lives of millions of people, but also pose a deadly consequence on the environment and climate.
It is a source of death, decay, disease and pollution for hundreds of thousands of people living in its shadows.
There is so much disease because of this garbage. Sometimes it's so difficult to just breathe.
Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Over the next 45 days, an estimated 400 million Hindu pilgrims are expected to converge here in Prayagraj on the banks of the holy river Ganga and Yamuna. It's a real kaleidoscope of people from all walks of life.
Well, hello, and thank you for watching Tonight on The Wrap. We will be joined by the very best commentators to explain the how and the why.
He did know what he was doing.
Both agree on that, can we?
No.
No. Can expect more analysis.
This is going to get deeper. I think it's going to end up with Russia.
Is war inevitable?
What he's interested in is a deal.
That doesn't rule out strikes.
I disagree.
And laughs along the way.
It was a cheat.
Plus, a look at tomorrow's headlines. The Wrap. Everything wrapped up for you from 10.
I just want to bring you an update on some breaking news we brought you earlier from Australia. Australia agreeing to provide visas to 5 of the Iranian women's soccer team to stay in the country. They were seeking asylum there. They're there for the Asian Cup tournament. US President Donald Trump urging Australia not to send them back to Tehran because of concerns over their safety. They refused to sing the national anthem during their match in the Asian Cup tournament. We've just been hearing from the Australian Prime Minister. Let's listen to what he had to say about this.
Further, late last night, we issued 5 humanitarian visas to members of the Iranian women's soccer team. We've been preparing for this for some time. And indeed, the Minister for Home Affairs, Tony Burke, travelled to Queensland on Sunday, returned and then travelled again last night. Australians have been moved by the plight of these brave women. They're safe here and they should feel at home here. The AFP have had plans in place with Commissioner Chrissy Barrett directly involved. And once it was made clear that these women wanted assistance, the Australian Federal Police moved them to a safe location where they remain. The Minister for Home Affairs has spoken directly with the ASIO Director-General about this, and we dealt with this as well through our appropriate security forums. We're willing to provide...
Straight now to Florida. President Donald Trump meeting congressional Republicans. Let's listen in.
Who was very good, by a wife who was desperately in love with him. She cried so much. Because I've seen the other two. I've seen guys at the end of the line, the wives aren't exactly shaken up. When they don't cry, when they have no tears or any sign of tears, this is not a good sign of a great marriage. But he must have a great marriage, because she was just devastated. She was going to lose her guy. But it worked out that the doctor said more blood was put into him than he's ever seen. He was in big trouble. I looked at him that night and I said goodbye to him, but he made it. He was brave, and look at the way he fought back from so many different things. Steve Scalise. And we have another one, Tom Emmer, who I really got to know over the last few years.
Well, I was reliably informed that Donald Trump, just before we went to him, was talking about the US military and what's going on in the Middle East, but he was talking about something completely different there. I'm not too sure what it was, but we'll take a break from that and we'll return to Donald Trump if he returns to the subject of the Middle East, which no doubt he will. But in the meantime, we've got time for some sport with David Garrido. Hello. I'm pausing the president for you. This better be good.
That's kind. I think it's pretty good.
Well, the magic of the FA Cup, I think, is good enough to pause the president for. It's well and truly alive, isn't it, after Port Vale's win at the weekend?
Yeah.
And we are waiting to see, or do we know who they've got in the next round?
We do know, but let's quickly talk about this guy. This is Ben Waine. Not only is he in great form in the Cup, but also he's a Newcastle fan. And when he scored the winner at Vale Park against Sunderland, I mean, like, you know, bobbly pitch, you know, they're doing really badly in League One. Yeah. Sunderland have had a good... It's all the FA Cup things, right, that you would expect. Well, he then did an Alan Shearer-esque celebration, you know, the one arm up, you know, the one left arm up, of course, in front of the Sunderland fans. Anyway, yeah, we do know who they play. Port Vale will be away to Chelsea. I was going to say, that's building up suspense. Chelsea away. First competitive meeting since 1929. Manchester City against Liverpool at the Etihad is perhaps the glamour tie of the round. Arsenal will go to Southampton, who knocked out Fulham, and Leeds travel to either West Ham or Brentford. Yeah. West Ham and Brentford are playing tonight in the final FA Cup fifth round tie of the round. West Ham 2-1 up, courtesy of Jared Bowen, their captain. The second one a penalty. Igor Thiago scored in between times for Brentford. But right now it looks like it'll be West Ham against Leeds in that other quarter-final. But yes, Port Vale, having beaten Bristol City in the week, then Sunderland at home at the weekend, they will be away to Chelsea in the FA Cup quarter-final. So
that is a magic tie, that one.
It really, really is. Yeah, OK, right. Well, we'll update you on that as and when those ties take place. Let's give you some more sporting headlines this evening.
Good afternoon. I'm sure all the Arsenal fans would want to know how much ammunition are you going to give Arsene Wenger to fire? It'll be enough.
Arsene wanted certain players to come in, and meanwhile he wasn't really the manager yet.
I went a few times to watch Khan play, and I asked after the game, who is this guy?
Patrick was top of his list.
He was telling me that he was on his way to Arsenal, and I said, listen, you're going anywhere, I'll follow you.
He was going to join Ajax, and in fact I think Bayern Munich were also in for him at the time.
I spent 3 days in Amsterdam.
So we had to hijack it.
His agents called me tell him to take the plane to fly to London.
People are breaking the mould. We had to rely on Arsene's judgment.
Adding a continental touch to Arsenal's never say die style is what Wenger is promising.
Quand je suis venu, je veux dire, il y a tout ce qu'il faut pour être un grand club. Je veux dire, ils ont un public qui est fabuleux.
I believe he has a great future. At the time, English players were dominant. It was a risk, yes, when we bought.
Right, let's have a quick look at the weather before we go.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors Sky News Weather.
Strong winds and prolonged rain moving in later tomorrow will end the mainly calm but rather gloomy spell we are experiencing at the moment. Before then, mainly dry this evening, but Britain could expect a few showery outbreaks. The west of Ireland will see some more general rain moving in. England, Wales and eastern Scotland will remain quite cloudy overnight, but evening showers will fade. Western Scotland, Ireland and Northern Ireland will see light patchy rain.
All Clear Travel Insurance proudly sponsors Sky News Weather.
What's the best thing about being a Sky News journalist? Who's funnier? Being a Sky News journalist.
A special edition of The World with me, Yalda Hakim.
Pakistan had the right to respond. You're like, what?
A historic day here today.
Congratulations, this is a huge moment.
But what happens now?